I have been an online teacher for many years now, and I have seen some unpleasant statistics about online courses. I've seen students buy an online course and they start it and get bored with it and never get back to that course again because they are not motivated. Most courses are too flat, they have no examples. They just hit you with a big wave of information that is too overwhelming and impossible to digest. This course is made differently, so you can start and finish the course. I teach you Python basics, but with a lot of examples. Then once you learn the basics, we start building real-world programs together using the knowledge that you learned in the previous videos. Only when you make an application you can keep yourself motivated. In the course, you will make a desktop application with a graphical user interface where the end user can interact with your program using widgets such as input boxes and buttons. By entering input, your program processes that input and returns the output to the user to that app. So it's a real program. You're also going to learn how to make a web application from start to finish and deploy that app online. All that using Python 3. Moreover, one special thing about this course is that we use a bare-bone text editor. With a basic editor, such as the one we use in the course, you'll always know what is going on with the code. And that's how you learn how to code. Of course, I'll show you how to work with a more advanced editor, but later in the course, after you have learned the basics of Python. So if you have never programmed before, or if you know the basics of Python but you are not yet confident, this course will give you a deep understanding of Python. And while I cannot say this course is all you need to become a good Python programmer, I can promise you will be able to create decent Python programs on your own after you finish this course. Ideally, you want to spend 1 to 2 hours every day watching the videos and trying everything that I show on your own text editor. This would take you around 1 month to complete the entire course. Please know that Udemy offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so even if you don't like the course, you can return it and get a refund. So there's nothing to lose. Sign up now and start learning Python today. Hi, welcome to the course. Please don't skip this video because here I'm going to tell you what to expect from this course and how to take it. I designed this course not with the intention of giving you as much information as possible, but with the intention to keep you motivated so you can eventually learn Python and not give up like many students do. They start learning and they don't manage to build any program, so eventually they have to give up. In this course, I explain everything by referring to real examples. First, you are going to learn the basics of Python, and while I'll teach you the basics, we also look at some simple code examples, things like filtering a list of numbers, finding words in a piece of text, and so on. Then once you learn the basics, we focus on building real useful programs, which people can actually use. Indeed, I'll teach you how to make a desktop program with Python, and that program has a real friendly graphical user interface where the user can input data into the program, your program processes the input, and the user presses buttons on the interface and they get back the output that you processed in your program, and you will code that entire program in Python 3. I'll also show you how to make a web application with Python and even deploy that web app on a live server. So by the end of the course, you will have your own website, which you have built with Python. And building these two apps, so the desktop app and the web app, will give you an excellent insight of Python, and you'll be able to make more apps after completing the course. So this is the content of the course. You have videos, you have quizzes, you have exercises. The exercises can be solved directly on the Udemy interface. So you can just write the code in here and press on check solution to see if your code was correct. First, the exercises are simple, but they get more difficult as you progress through the course. In the beginning, we are going to use what I like to call it as a bare-bone text editor. It's a very simple text editor, no distractions. We have advanced editors, but advanced editors let you autocorrect the code and fold the code and do things like that. But that's bad for a beginner. You don't want your text editor to automatically do some things on your code. Programming is going to seem like a black box for you if your editor does part of the job. So first we use a plain text editor where you have to do all the coding and you have to fix the errors that you make on your code. And later, once you have become better with Python, we switch to an advanced text editor. I'll cover how to set that up, and so one step at a time. The plain text editor is indeed a cloud-based solution that we use now. In the first part of the course, you can access that text editor from your browser, which is very cool, so you can run Python from your browser. This also allows you to code in Python from your mobile phone, since all you need is a browser. So that was a short introduction about. Hi there, and thanks again for choosing to take this course. I promise you will learn a lot if you are motivated to keep going. Alright, so now you're going to start programs, not on applications at the core. It's just a simple program to get it on Python code. It doesn't matter whether you have Python. You can gain access to a Linux computer and write and run programs from that Linux. Just like Windows and Mac operating systems. And pre-programmers this full utility that allows you to interact with the computer using it, as opposed to doing clicks and dragging files and so on. That's powerful, and Linux is good for programming. And you're also going to learn how to use Okay, so to show you how you get to the computer, use the from your internet browser. That's entirely for free. So on anywhere.com. So please visit pythonanywhere.com, and here you'll be able to host, run and code Python in the cloud. And they have a free plan which doesn't get computer. Let's go with that plan. So I've tried it and it will satisfy all Python. If your applications that you're going to build have and lots of processing, then you may for paid plans, but that's going to happen later when you get more experience and you start running real programs. Okay, so let's go ahead and sign up for an account here. So we want to create a beginner account. If the website looks different on your end, don't worry, because Python Anywhere they change the layout sometimes. Okay, so here you want to name, email, and a password for your account. Then click on register. That's it. If you want to see the tour, go ahead and connect the tour and show you around a little bit. And show you how to create your first Python program here and run it from here. So this is that you have Python Anywhere. You're going to do everything from the browser. You're going to write Python programs and execute them from the browser. And I talked about the interface. The command line interface can be accessed through bash is another name for the command line, or sometime you may call it terminal. So terminal and command line, they mean the same thing. So click on bash. Interface that you're going to use for Linux. So now here is automatically installed, and its stable version is installed. And let's go and create your first Python program. You need a text editor, actually, because Python is the programming language that will execute the code, but you need an editor. Python Anywhere you can use. This is what I'm going to use. And really what you do is you resolve the program, which is nano, and the name of your program. You use any name that you want, but it's with a .py extension, program.py. Click enter. And here you can start writing Python code. I'm going to write a program that prints out hello. Okay, this is very simple. Use a print function, so that's a keyword of Python that you want, like that. Quotes, just like I did it. Print hello. Then writing your program, you can exit your text editor. And here, so Ctrl X will exit the program. So this asks you if you want to save modified buffer, basically is the text. So do you want to press Y or no? It doesn't matter whether it's Y or lowercase, like that. And finally, do you want to keep that name? If you want, you can press enter, like that. Now, if you execute ls and press enter, in your current directory, you have two files. There's a default reading contained in your Linux directory, and your new file that you have just created. So it's myprogram.py. Now execute this myprogram.py with the Python. The commands to execute Python is on 3. So that we use Python version 3. 2 just like Python, like that. But we're going to use like version, and then after Python 3, myprogram.py edit. And this is your program output. So as easy as that, your program has and, which was a print function in this case. So in this case was hello, and so the duty of the print function is to print out text, and what the program does. In this lecture, I'll talk to you in the next lecture. Hey, hi again. If you have chosen to use Python Anywhere for this course, please watch this video. If you have chosen to work on your own computer like Windows and Mac or your own Linux computer, you can choose to skip this lecture. Python is a cross-platform language, so it doesn't matter whether you're using it on Windows or Mac or Linux, because the Python code is the same. So feel free to use any of the platforms. If you choose to use Python Anywhere, in this lecture I'm going to show you the most useful commands that you can use to navigate your bash console. So basically to navigate your computer, your virtual computer. So in this lecture I'm going to show you how to list directory content, which I already did by the way with ls, and else I'm going to show you how to get to print out the directory path, how to create a new directory, how to create a new file, how to remove a file, how to go back one directory level, how to remove an entire directory, how to copy a file, move a file, rename a file, and that's it. Those are the most useful commands that I'm going to show you right away now. So ls again lists the current files of the current directory. But what is the current directory? You should know that. You have the right to know. with pwd, you get the path of your current directory. So pm1 is the name of the folder. My username was pm1, so Python Anywhere creates your folder with that name. Now, it'd be a good idea to actually create a directory where you put all your Python files, or let's say a directory where you put your files for the basics of Python, and then you create another directory for app1 and so on. To create a directory, you can use the mkdir command, and then you pass the name of the directory that you want to create. Let's say basics, like that. If you don't get any output, that means the command was successfully executed. You can do ls, and you'll see that basics now is here. So it's a directory. Now, if you want to go inside the directory, because currently you are in pm1, if you want to go inside basics, you do cd, which stands for change directory, basics. By the way, there is a good feature to use here. Once you start typing a name of a file or a folder, like BAC, then you can press tab for auto completion. So that will complete the name for basics. So it will look for the current names and it will just complete the name. So it's easier for you. It's faster. Then press enter. And now you're inside basics, as you can see in here. But if you don't trust me, you can do pwd. And you see that you are here. ls, it's an empty folder, so don't get anything here. If you want to go back again, you can do cd and 2 dots, which stands for one directory level back. You see that now you're again in pm1. Let's go again to basics, and I'll show you how to create a file. Let's say you would want to create a text file. You'd use the touch command, myfile.txt. You give the name of the file that you want to create and press enter, do ls, and you see that myfile.txt is there. You could also use the nano editor actually to create a new file or to open an existing file, like nano myfile, press tab, .txt. So it's an empty file. You can start creating writing text there. I showed you already how to use nano in the previous lecture. Ctrl X to exit. If you want to remove the file, you can do rm myfile.txt, and the file will be removed. So you see ls returns an empty list now. If you want to copy a file from another directory, you can use cp, which stands for copy. Let me copy the myprogram.py file into the basics folder. But it's important to know where you are currently. Currently we are in the basics folder, so in that case you want to refer to one directory back, and then the slash, and then the name of the file you want to copy, like that. So that's the path of the file that you want to copy, and then you have to write the name of the file that you want it to have. So maybe you want to have the same name, like that. Press enter, ls, and you see that myprogram.py is here. If you wanted to do it the other way around, let me remove my program. You could also have done like a cd, go back to the pm1 directory, and then copy my program, and then you do basics, like that, slash, and give the name of the file where you want to copy it. So basically the content of this file will be pasted in the content of this new file that you're creating in the basics directory. And that should do it. Let me clear the bash console, like that. So currently we are in pm1. If you want to list the content of the basics directory, you can do ls basics. So you see that you have myprogram.py. If you want to move a file, you use mv. So myprogram.py of the pm folder. So note that when I'm inside the PM1 folder, you don't use the PM1 like my program. This would be wrong, because in that case, Linux, the bash, would search for a folder named PM1 inside the PM1 folder, which doesn't exist. So you just use my program, and where you want to move it, you want to move it to the basics folder. My program, let's say 1.py. Okay, if you do ls basics, you'll see that now you have two files there, while in the PM directory you don't have my program.py anymore. So to remove a file, you could use basic my program. Let's move that file. Again, if you don't get any output, that means the removal, the delete of the file was successful. If you want to remove an entire directory, like let's remove the basics directory entirely, you want to use the R flag, which means for recursive. That means it will delete all the files of the directory you're referring to, like that. So for directories, use the R flag with this dash. Missing operand, this is the error you'll get when you don't use a command as it should be. So in this case I use rm without specifying the file I want to remove. ls doesn't need a parameter, so you see you only have readme now. You deleted everything else, so you deleted the folder. To rename a file you can use mv, let me remove this file, to readme.txt. ls, you see that the name has changed. And yeah, that's pretty much what you need to know about how to use a bash console on Linux. And attached in this lecture you have a text file with a complete list of commands that you can run on the bash, but these ones are the most important ones. If you can use these ones, you'll be good to go. You can call yourself that you can use a Linux computer. So I'll talk. Hey, hi again. In this lecture I'm going to cover strings in Python. As you are realizing, Python is made of different data objects, so which can be strings, number, and lists, such as this one here. So in this lecture we're going to cover strings, and here I have an interactive Python shell here on the right. So you saw that print hello is actually a string. Another way to write strings is to use single quotes. So this would be fine too. Hello, like that. So how do I know that this is a string? Well, you can use a type function, and you'll see that this is str, so it's a string. You can store a string in a variable, like the variable myString, hello world, like that, and then just call it, and you'll get it printed out like this. And strings are made of characters. So for example, this string has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The space is also considered a character. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. You can check the length of a string using the len function. You'll see that you get 12. So the length of a string is 12 characters. Even numbers enclosed in quotes are actually strings. You can check the type of this, and you'll see that this is a string. So you'd probably ask, why is that? Well, Python has to divide things very strictly. So it has to know the type of value that you're using, that you're passing to the program, because in certain scenarios it might make a difference. For example, if you do 100 plus 100, with quotes like that, Python knows that these are strings, so it doesn't perform a mathematical operation, but it does perform a concatenation. So it basically concatenates these two strings, and it says 100 and 100. Now this is different if those were numbers, and so I'll explain. Hey, hi and welcome to this new section. In the previous lectures I mentioned that we'll be working on this program. So I'm going to break down this program line by line, and so by the end of the lectures of this section you're going to understand what each of these lines does, and you're going to understand each of the keywords of this program. And so this piece of code basically includes all the Python fundamentals. That means if you understand this program, you will be able to make similar programs later on. So in this particular lecture, I'm going to run this program and explain the output of the program so that you have an idea of what this program does. I'm going to use Python Anywhere, so which gives you access to the Linux server to have on Python even for. So this gives you the download the basic Python lecture resources in this video. So together with sample.txt file. The sample.txt file is as a data source by the program. So basically the program uses to query and find attached a diagram.png file. This is the code actually that I just showed you. Our program. Here I have highlighted all the components of this program, the components of a Python program, all the fundamentals of the Python program. For example, if you want to know what is something that has a dot in, for example, dot read with brackets, and this has this rectangle that I drew here. Orange is a method, and you also have some examples of a method, of a Python method, and so on. You have also other components of a program. So keep this somewhere safe, and I'm sure you'll use it. Then upload the basics.py file, the sample.txt file into Python Anywhere. One way to do that is to go to the Files menu, and then make sure you are in the directory where you want to upload the file to. Currently I am in home. I want to go to home pm1 back. That's a folder I want to upload. Okay. In just a few seconds you'll have the file there. Also sample.txt, like that. Then go again to consoles, and you'll see that the console that I had opened in the browser is still here. So if I open this, you'll see that I'm still in basics folder, so the processes will not get when you close your browser. Your browser tab is closed, but not, so you can find the consoles in the. Okay, now if you do ls here, you'll see that basics.py and sample.txt are here in your basics folder. I'm gonna run this now. So what the program is doing is it's printing out this text floor string 18, which is a of store. So this program is made for stores and prints out the store. So these are fictional bits created. Then the program asks the user to enter so the pin code, or let's say there are no employees, and the program wants to if this is an employee or not. That is script is 1, 2, 3, 4. But the program goes to the next step. It asks you, the employee, to enter the name that you know whether it's in the. In this case is a sample.txt file, which basically contains the line apple, orange, and banana. So let's say somewhere from the departments of the puts this sample.txt file in the folder, and the program accesses this file. You, the employee, then checks through the program if a certain fruit. So we want to check for orange. It's actually in that sample. And so the program tells us the list, and the program ends, as you see here. You see directory.
So the program ascended successfully. You didn't get any error. Through this program, the employee knows a fruit is available. So if we run this again, enter a pink code, in this case an incorrect one that doesn't exist. Place incorrect pin. This info can be accessed only by... So as you see, the program is intelligent. It reads your input, output depending on your input. Don't worry if you don't understand anything. Certain aspects of how it does that, because we're going to explain that. So let me time to input the correct pin again. Put a fruit which is not in the list of sample, like melon, and the program says no such fruit found. That's it. File, by the way, so apple, orange, banana. Control S to exit. And yeah, that's about what the program. In the next lecture, I'm going to open the code and you the code line by line. See you there. Hey, hi again. In this lecture, you're going to learn about variables. And in our program, now, something important that you should know is that a Python program is made of data, functions, and variables. So basically, these are the three concepts you need to know now. So again, data objects, functions that do things with data objects, they manipulate them, they get them and print them out, these data objects, etc. And you also have variables, and variables are used to store data objects and also to store this object, these functions in variables. The three components make up a Python program. Now let's look at some variables. All the names that you see in this format, so address equal to, this is a variable. So basically here we are assigning a data object, which is this thing here. We'll cover that later. We're assigning that to in other words, the variable is like a container where you can put this object. This is also a variable, this one as well. So having this by an assignment operator is a variable. Now I'm going to another browser page. You click here and go to open link window, and then just put this and also in here, and I'm going to open console. Into several windows. Here I'm going to start an interactive Python session so that I explain things interactively. I'm going to create another variable here, greeting, for example, equals to hello. So once you do that, basically you are storing this text in this variable, which is a name. And now what you can do is print greeting. What you get is the value that the container, the variable, is holding, which is hello. If you want, you can update that to hi. Press the upper arrow key to call print again. So print greeting. It's time you get hi. So basically, variables are used to organize your code. You can define something here, but then you have lines of other lines and you refer to that name again, you can update it and so on. Variables later as we look at this program and other programs. So you'll see that the role that the variables play in your. So you can choose for variables, but there are some rules. For example, start the variable with a number like that. So you get a syntax error. So you're not following the rules of Python variables with a number. You can have a number or in the end of the variable name like that. That would be fine, but not in the beginning. You can also start variables with an underscore like that. You can also use capital letters like that. This is technically it's not a problem, but it doesn't follow the standard conventions of Python. So just use lowercase letters for variables. Different kinds of objects. Actually, you can store everything in a variable. So in this case, we're storing a string. So this is called a string or a tag. But technically in Python, it's called a string. So and this is not a string. It's not a number. This is called a list. We'll cover that later. So for now, I'm not going through this program. We still have a few basics to learn before we go and explain the first line here. So in the next lecture, I explain you strings. And then in the lecture after that, we're going to cover numbers. And so I'll talk to you in the next. Great. I already showed you how to create a Python program, which was very easy to do. I could create a folder, go inside that folder, like that. Use a nano editor to create a file and start coding right away there. And press Ctrl X, Y and enter, and then you could execute that program like that and you get the output. So that's the standard way to create and execute a Python program. However, there is also another way, which is to write code interactively, to actually write and execute code interactively. What I mean by that is, besides using Python to execute a program, a Python file, which is basically a program, you can also use Python without any argument, without any parameter. So just Python, press enter, and that will actually start the Python interactive shell. So this here is called the Python interactive shell. And again, here you can use Python code like that. Just type it and then press enter, and that will execute the code like that. So the interactive shell is good for testing things out. If you're writing a program, of course you're going to write it in a file, like a .py file. But while you write it, you may want to test things out because you're not sure how some parts of the code work. Here you get the output right away. So it's a quick way to test the code. You can also use this as a calculator, like that. I'm going to cover these things later, by the way, but just to show you that this is also possible. Something important to know is that you can exit the shell with exit and round brackets like that. And once you exit the shell, basically you have lost this code. So it isn't saved anywhere like it was saved with the file that we created earlier. So the file, my program.py, has the code for you, but the Python shell doesn't save the code in any file. So it's basically lost. That's about this lecture. I'll talk to you later. Great, in the previous lecture you saw how to create a string, and in this lecture we're going to cover numbers. I'm going to clear the Python console. You can do that using Ctrl L, so that will work on Linux. If you are on Windows, it may not work, so it works on Python anywhere. Numbers are simply create it like that. But there are two main types of numbers. For example, if you do type for a, you'll see that this is an integer. You can similarly do type 100. This is also an integer. Integers are whole numbers. Even minus 100 is an integer. So every number like minus 10, 0, 1, 2, 10, 100 and so on are integers in Python. You can try 0. And you also have floats, which basically are decimal point numbers, like that. And so on. Now, in the previous lecture, I showed you that 100 plus 100, each quoted as a string, it gives you this number. But if you use them without quotes, Python will treat them as numbers. So when to use a float and when to use an integer? Well, most of the time for mathematical operations, when you're interested in doing mathematical operations, you're going to use floats. But sometimes, for example, in this case, we have some pin codes. In this case, we're not interested about decimal points, so it's fine just to use integers. And by the way, it's also possible to convert between different data types. And we're going to cover that in the next lecture, which is about functions. So we use functions to convert different data types from one data type to another data type. Hi, and welcome to this new lecture. In this lecture, you're going to learn about a very important concept in Python, and that is custom functions. We already looked at built-in functions in Python. And for example, the len function was a built-in function, so it's already built in Python. Python developers have built this function to get a sequence as an input, like a string or a list or a dictionary, and return the length of that sequence. Or in other words, the items, the number of the items or the characters of a string. So built-in functions have been created to do popular operations. However, you'll see that as you program with Python or with any other language, you'll see that you may need functions that do custom things, such as, for example, in our case, in this program, this function, what this does is it reads a file, so it opens a text file in Python, and then it reads the content inside that file, and then it checks if a given word is in the text file, in the content of the text file. So Python doesn't have a function to do this thing, therefore you want to create such a function. Well, it's not mandatory to actually have a function here, because you could have these lines outside of this function block. So these lines don't necessarily need to be inside a function. But having a function, so wrapping these lines, these actions inside the function, so reading the file and checking if a string is in the file, putting these inside the function, it's a good practice. It actually keeps your code more organized. So it's good to put certain actions of your program inside functions to organize it in one function. And maybe you have another thing, you could put it inside another function, and so on. So in our program, we're checking for user input in here. The user enters the pin code, and we check the pin code against the dictionary values. And so if the pin code is found in the dictionary values, then we want to exit this function in here. So here is how we call the function. We define the function here, and we call it in here. So that's in general about custom functions. That's the idea. Now in the next lecture, I'll show you how to create a function, and I'll show you the syntax, the correct syntax, and the components of a custom. Hey, welcome again. This is yet another lecture, and this is the last lecture that is about this program. And as you may guess it, we're talking about these last two lines. These are the very last lines that we haven't covered yet. So we covered everything from the first line to this line here. And what is this? Well, this is a for loop. What a for loop does is a for loop goes through a sequence object, which could be a list, a string, a dictionary, and it goes through all the items of that sequence and it does something to each item. Let me go ahead and demonstrate that. Let's say A is a list 1, 2, 3, so it has 3 items. What if you want to print out each item in each line? Well, you could do print A0, print A1, print A2. So you'd have a script with these 3 lines of code and you'd get 1 to 3. However, what if you have a list with 100 items? You don't want to execute the print function 100 times. You don't want to type down the print function 100 times. What you do instead is you do for and pick a variable, let's say I or item, whatever you want, in A, print item. And this is what you get, 1, 2, 3. You could do that for lists, you could do that for strings, for item in A, print item. As you see, you could also do that for dictionaries. Let's say pins is a dictionary. For item in pins, print item. And you get Mike, Joe, Jack. As you see, this is a bit different because this is printing out the keys of the dictionary. So when you just do pins, it prints out the keys of the dictionary. If you want to print out the values of the dictionary, you do pins dot values, print item, and you get 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. Also, I want to tell you that the equivalent of for item in pins is the same as doing for items for item in pins keys. Print item, and that will give you the keys one by one. And that's exactly what we're doing in here. So let me exit this and execute basics.py 1, 2, 3, 4 banana. As you see, in this case, this is not executed. So the expressions under else are not executed because this condition here was evaluated to true. But if you enter an incorrect pin, you see that you get Mike, Joe, Jack. So this is just to show the user that this info can be accessed only by, so which is here, print incorrect pin, print this info can be accessed only by, and then next the for loop will print out each of the keys of the pins dictionary. That's the idea. Of course, let me open a Python shell again. Of course, that to print function, the print function is not the only thing you can do under a for loop. You can also do other things like create another variable like c equals to I plus 10, and maybe then print c again. So as you see, you can do operations under the for loop. And the way this works is now the for loop. What it does is it works with iterations. So it starts with by assigning the first item of this sequence to the variable I. So this is a variable in this case. So in the first iteration, I will be equal to 1. And so what you do is you create a variable c equals to 1 plus 10, which means c will be equal at 11 for now, and then you print out c. That's why get 11. And then the loop will go again to the list. It will check if there are more items. In this case, there is another item, which is item 2. So I will assign the value of 2. And then C, which currently has a value of 11, will be updated with 2 plus 10. So C will get the value of 12. And we print the value of C, so we get 12. The loop again checks if there is one more item in the list. Yes, there is. So again, E is equal to 3, C is updated with 13 and printed out in here. And then the for loop goes again to the list. Are there more items? Well, there are no more items, so the loop ends. It terminates and then the program also terminates. That's the idea. You can also iterate through the file, like that. C, which is a content. So C at this point is just a string. If we iterate through that for now, for I in C, print I, what we get is we get the string items one by one, because the string, the items of the strings are characters. But we don't want that in this case. We want to print out the words one by one, not the characters. And therefore we need to convert C into a list using split lines. As you see, C now is a list. So if you do for I in C, print I, you get apple, orange, banana. So that's about the for loop. For loops are very powerful, as you see, when you do batch operations. So when you apply a function or a method or some operations multiple times using different items in some compound data types such as lists, dictionaries, and strings. And yeah, I hope this is.
Let's say you have a friend who is a geometer and he just came to USA and he realized that he was used to the meters system, to the metric system. Now he has to use feet to measure distances. So you are the programmer and he asks you, he tells you, hey, you know Python, can you make me a program where I can easily convert meters to feet units? You say, yeah, I can do that straight away, and you start meters, feet. So you define a function that get meters as input and the coefficient, which is always 3.28084. So 1 meter is equal to this amount of feet, and then you return meters times the coefficient, and then you include a print function here that prints out the feet given an amount of meters. So you try the function and you get the expected output. So 10 meters is equal to these 32 point something feet. So what you do next is you just get this script.py file and send it to your friend and tell him to use it. Then your friend gets back to you and says, I have no idea what to do with that file. Because your friend doesn't know Python, which is normal. Most of the people, they don't know Python. So you cannot just give them a .py script and expect them to use that file. They will have to install Python and they will have to edit this file, and they will have to enter different values here for any conversion they want to make. But that is not user-friendly. What you want to give to your friend instead, or to anyone that needs a program to do something, is this here. You need to give them a graphical user interface where they could click and push buttons instead of working on a script, which is meant for programmers, not for normal users. So here they can just input a number and get the conversion by just pressing a button. So in this section, I'm going to show you how to go from here to this nice program. And in the section after that, we're going one step further, and we're going to learn how to make this into a web app that everyone can visit by just visiting your address, your URL on the browser, so they can use your program through the browser. So in this section, the desktop GUI, the desktop graphical user interface. In the next section, the web app. So I hope you have fun with this. Hi, in the previous section we built this desktop app. It works offline, so you enter some value for meters and you get feeds in return. This is a desktop app. In this section we're going to build the same program but as a web app, which will look like this. So you enter meters there, press the button and you get the feed converted here. As you can see, this is online, so you can access this at feed.pythonanywhere.com. And I'm going to show you also how you can deploy your app, your Python web app, on a live server, just like I did in here. So your app will also be live and you can give it to anyone. So let's go ahead and do this in the next